Dr Hatrick was commenting on the balance of payments figures at today's meeting of the Rotary Club of Newcastle. He says imports must continue to fall for at least 5 successive months for the government to ease its high interest rate policy further. Hatrick believes the outlook for the next few years is full of hope, but admits business confidence is low at the moment. He says talk of a recession should be qualified.
So far unemployment's not being affected. That's really the key to it. It's not a classical recession as the textbooks would have it, because the job market is still quite firm.
Hatrick says the businesses which will survive the nervous 90s are those with a low debt burden and an export market. That places the Hunter's coal, steel and agricultural industries on a sound footing. And there are other reasons for an optimistic outlook for the region.
Well, the Hunter will be affected by the downturn affecting Australia as a whole, but the big factor in favour of the Hunter is that its growth of population is higher than the average. People are migrating here from Sydney, and that means that there's more building activity, more housing activity, more motor vehicle activity, more retail trade activity than you would get on average across the state.
The Kurri Football Club hold a unique record by producing more rugby league internationals than any other country club in Australia, 10 in total. Mick Shields passed away a few years back with the distinction of being Kurri's first representative in 1935. Noel White will be at the function on Saturday evening, and he played a test for Australia in 1946. Dennis Booker, who died last year, made his international debut for Wales and made 6 test appearances between 48 and 52. Rhys Duncan was playing for Kurri when he was called upon to make his international debut and retired after 21 games, including 2 tests for his country. Jack Lumsden played 1 test against the Kiwis in 1952, and his brother Eddie became a household name with 15 test and 42 appearances in the green and gold. The legend John Sattler played 13 international matches, including 4 tests. Gary Sullivan, 12 games, 2 tests and the World Cup final in 1972. Big Bill Hamilton played 8 games for Australia, and Jeff Masterman played in 2 tests and 10 internationals.
We're holding a function in the auditorium. The internationals will be asked to speak on their rugby league experiences, which I think everybody will be looking forward to. The international court will be for sale on the night. We hope the club will be able to, make some money there to help things roll along a bit.
Lake Macquarie Council tonight voted to introduce the unique scheme in which aldermen will work side by side with local police. Under the scheme, which is the first of its kind in Australia, Lake Macquarie will be split into areas by police, each section controlled by a sergeant. The alderman attached to that area will work directly with the officer so that problems can be easily and quickly identified. It's proposed the alderman will also act as avenues, gathering information from people who do not wish to approach police directly. In coming weeks, aldermen will join police in an evening patrol, familiarising themselves with problem areas. It's hoped the scheme will be adopted by other New South Wales councils. Alderman Ivan Welsh and Inspector McSporran provide details of the scheme in Newsnight tonight at 10:30. Jodie McKay at Lake Macquarie Council for NBN News.
Hamilton TAFE College has more than 100 students enrolled in adult education for basic reading and writing skills. But that's just a fraction of the real problem. 1 in 5 Australians cannot perform tasks like filling in common forms.
For instance, the complex driving manual that you now have to learn to get your driver's licence, that would be beyond 20% of the population.
Research shows 40% of Australians cannot read a flight schedule accurately. Frighteningly, only 50% can correctly follow dosage instructions on medicines. Jocelyn Ellis from Hamilton TAFE says the Education Department isn't completely at fault. Some students have extra needs with specific learning and emotional problems which fall outside the system. Furthermore, she says it's not that illiteracy has increased, it's simply that society now expects more. While sufferers become withdrawn with a low sense of self-esteem, they also become cunning, going to any lengths to avoid public knowledge of their problem.
Some people pretend they've forgotten their glasses. A lot of people take forms home with them to fill in. They say, oh, I haven't got time now, I'll take it home. But in fact, they take it home and the wife or the husband, sometimes sons or daughters, will fill it in for the parent.
But this is not just a problem in social terms. According to a government survey, illiteracy costs the Australian people $3.2 billion a year in lost productivity. With talk of restructuring Australian industry, it's essential the workforce has literacy and numeracy skills to be retrained. With 1990, the year of literacy, the government has allocated $3 million to research the issue. Next month, Newcastle University will host a 3-day conference. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
But while the future look of the prime King Street site is to be given plenty of thought, Waterboard management will also have to spare some time to ponder its own image. A recent survey of the board's 1,200 employees came to the overwhelming conclusion that the hierarchy isn't held in the highest esteem. Employees were asked a total of 48 questions. A very definite theme emerged in those dealing with management. There was a strong us and them attitude, with workers commenting that management seemed to be lacking in communication skills. They also clearly believed there was one set of rules for management and another for the rank and file.
Management was seen as a bogeyman, and I suppose that's fairly typical of most organisations, and the surprising thing in ours was the strength of feeling. So I've got to get myself out, which I have been doing. The people around me have got to get out and talk to our workers.
It was the first such survey ever conducted by the Water Board, and Paul Broad said he's glad he did it. He said there was a bit of a shake-up for management, but there was also plenty of positive aspects. In all, employees clearly had a good view of themselves and their skills. The board will follow up the survey with another in 12 months' time.
When builders and parishioners inspected the 99-year-old church after the quake, they thought the worst.
We felt a bit shocked when we first came in and thought the prospect was that the building had gone for keeps.
Closer study, however, found that although the damage was major, it was repairable. Giant cracks in the wall could be fixed and structural damage corrected in time for the church's 100th birthday in September. Incredibly, just 6 weeks after work began, the Baptist Tabernacle is open again for Christian worship. Builders toiled 7 days a week on the job, rendering, painting and plastering. The $180,000 bill was covered by insurance, although church officials say they'll need another $70,000 for surrounding buildings. After the tragedy of the quake, the early finish to the church repairs has been warmly greeted, with the first service planned for Sunday.
Do you think you might have had a little bit of help from above?
Well, we prayed that way, and I'm sure we'll be returning thanks on Sunday, yes, sure.
Berkeley Vale High School was built for 800 pupils only 3.5 years ago. Now there are well over 1,000 students. It's a similar story at the entrance and Lisarow High Schools, both built for 900, now housing 1,300. With the fast growth of new housing on the Central Coast, the situation is expected to worsen. Bob Graham, member for the entrance, believes new schools are the only answer. Though the government is committed to a new high school for the Gosford area in 1991, it still hasn't chosen a site. But land has been bought in the Tumby Valley, though so far no school buildings have been erected. Instead, these demountables were sent to Berkeley Vale High last January, a school with little spare space that isn't flood-prone. The access roads alone cost $45,000. But the demountables were in such a poor condition that they still cannot be used for teaching.
The facilities are cramped already. The facilities for the teachers are cramped. The teachers are walking over each other in preparation rooms. That's not good. The atmosphere for the children isn't good, and I believe that we would be better off moving the demountables and putting them at the site at Tumby.
A small music room and the teachers' common room are both being used for classes, while the staff room remains extremely cramped.
We have been noted by the present government as a centre of excellence, particularly in student welfare. Now that's going to go by the board if we continue to cram children into this block. They must be given a good education, and the best place to give them that is in a school that can cater for them without being overcrowded.
In New South Wales, more than 70% of land is affected by land degradation. Nearly 60 million hectares slowly being destroyed by human intervention.
Land degradation, I feel, is the most serious problem affecting the rural lands of New South Wales or of Australia at the moment. But because it's not furry or green, nobody seems to worry about it.
Land degradation is simply the abuse of land. It's caused by overcropping, overstocking or over-irrigating, creating soil erosion, structure decline, high soil acidity and salinity. Soil conservation scientists estimate farmers in the Hunter are losing up to 20% of total production each year. Despite these alarm bells, some farmers are still ignoring the problem.
It is only those who, through ignorance, greed or through a necessity to sustain life, have to work their land beyond its capability that cause major degradation problems.
Soil conservationists called on landowners to plant more trees, cut back stocking rates and reduce cultivation to a minimum. Some areas of Australia have lost up to 30 centimetres of topsoil, washed into rivers and ending up in harbours. In Newcastle, dredges clean out 350,000 tonnes of silt each year, the legacy of farmlands upstream. A bipartisan group called Landcare has been formed to fight the destruction of Australian soils. The Hunter has groups in Merriwa, Patterson, Mulbring and Noonan, the country's new breed of greenies fighting to protect the environment.
Hunter schoolchildren expecting a half-day holiday were disappointed. The proposed strike was called off earlier this week.
In the period where we're asking members what they want us to do, we of course have lifted the bans and strikes, and we'll see what happens after that.
But while students were willing to attend, teachers didn't follow their example. Less than 200 came to today's meeting. Organisers blamed the short notice. It was the first of a series of regional meetings designed to plan the Federation's next move in its wages war with the Groner government. But although numbers were small, the debate was a lengthy one. The discussion period was extended 3 times as the argument continued. But unions insist the profession is solidly behind the campaign.
They very strongly want the salaries that they deserve, and they very strongly don't want to give up working conditions to do so. They have already given up huge amounts of working conditions, and they can't give up more.
The meeting eventually decided to support a move to leave the matter with the Arbitration Commission, but moved an amendment leaving the way open for further industrial action. Other regions will consider the issue over the next 3 weeks.
Canterbury have been the hot dogs of the competition until coming to grief at the hands of the Tigers last weekend. The Knights had a hiccup mid-season, but in the past 3 weeks have found some lost form, although going down to the Raiders last start. For coach Alan McMahon, tomorrow's dogfight will be just that.
Mike, it's going to be extremely difficult. I've had a look at them on the tape since Tuesday and Wednesday, and I've had Alan Bell look at them on the tape as well, and it is going to be a very, very hard match because they're such a hard side to play against, you know. Even though the coaches have changed over the last couple of years, their tactics and antics certainly haven't, you know. And it is going to be extremely difficult to attack against a side like that who are continually infringing the rules.
While talk in league circles centres around whether Steve Roach or Glenn Lazarus will line up for the Blues in the third State of Origin clash next week, McMahon can't believe the selectors have overlooked the Knights' Mark Sargent.
Well, if there's a more powerful runner in the game, then I've yet to see him. And Mark, to me, is just a standout in regards to the power in which the guy runs on a week-in, week-out basis. And they're even talking now that there's a furore between Steve Roach and Glenn Lazarus in regards to the props for the third State of Origin. Well, to me, they're good players, and they are good players, you know. But I see Mark Sargent week in, week out. I'm probably a bit biased, but none of them can match him for his running.
For Terry Lamb, who's sidelined through injury, the Knights at home is a daunting prospect.
I think we've played them 3 or 4 games and we haven't won a game up here, so very tight.
At the same time, Terry Lamb is over the moon about Canterbury's form in 1990.
Well, everybody writ us off at the beginning of the season, and we've just proved everybody wrong. We knew ourselves we could win, and we've done it so far.
"16 pavilions at Newcastle Showground are overladen with treasures, riches brought from all corners of the world. If you're in the market for some gold, how about this small piece? Or perhaps some Australian gemstones?"
How much money are we talking about here?
Well, we're not talking millions of dollars, we're talking billions of dollars.
They're here by the plateful. These exhibitions in the Geological Museum are worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Just the thing for the mantelpiece at home. But not all treasures are worth a king's ransom.
How about this pottery for $10? Going cheap.
The exhibition also covers coins, leatherwork, antiques, hobbies of all sorts. But my style is more in the nature of this rare collection of ruby sapphires, found 2 years ago by a Wall's End lady fossicking near Glen Innes. If you can get a key to the cabinet, use a little know-how, well, $500,000 worth is rather tempting. Unfortunately, crime doesn't pay, and this has been Peter Ryan reporting from behind the strong arm of the law.
Toronto Bay was awash with the sound and smell of high-powered racing today as the petrol heads left the bitumen behind and took to the briny. After 3 days of gruelling competition, all attention was focused on the Northern District's unrestricted inboard final. Offering an unprecedented winner's purse of $2,000, it attracted a top-class field armed with the sort of equipment more than capable of handling the choppy conditions.
They're all in excess of 20 foot. They're running big, powerful, in excess of about 1,500 horsepower engines, so they won't really bother them at all.
What sort of speeds are they going to be looking at out there?
Well, speeds in miles per hour, about 140 miles an hour, or in excess of 220, 230 kilometres an hour.
It was billed as a race in two between Sydney boat Maniac and Newcastle entry Possessed, but things weren't that simple when the starting flag dropped. Victorian boat Shantina led for 3 of the 4 laps but blew an engine. That left the favourites to battle out the finish, and it was the Sydney-siders who took the money. The locals got some measure of revenge when Kent Island led home the unlimited outboards. Meanwhile, further south, some other boating boffins were content to swap pace for grace in the Newcastle Catamaran Club's Polar Bear Regatta. A blustery sou'easter made conditions unpredictable, and there were some dramatic moments. Those to perform well included local pair Scott Crichton and Brett Watson in the NACRA division, and Wagga duo Gary Williams and Reg Pearce, who dominated the Paper Tigers. Bruce McKenzie, NBN News.
The rescue helicopter located the downed single-engine Beach Bonanza half-submerged in wetlands 5 minutes flight northwest of Williamtown Air Base near Madawi. Aircrew say it was an incredibly lucky landing. All 5 passengers on the light plane escaped unhurt. The pilot told rescuers his aircraft suffered engine failure in darkness a couple of hours after leaving Coolangatta en route for Bankstown.
I've been over here a couple of times. I knew there's a little bit of marshland out here, and just headed directly for that, and sort of just, when you get to 300 feet, there's nothing there. All of a sudden you see the trees, and you just make the best landing you can possibly make in the trees.
What advice did you give to the passengers?
Just remain calm and don't panic, and slightly apologetic to them actually.